It's a fundamental flaw in music teaching in the conservatory model that you have to do it in a certain way. And what we need as musicians is we need to put the student at the center of what is teaching. What does that student need? How does their body work? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they bringing to the situation? What do they want? Instead of them just coming into a lesson and standing there like an empty vessel and the teacher pouring all of this information into them without even asking one question about what they think. If you had lessons, you probably had lessons like that. You just go and you're like, tell me, because you pay money and this might be a great teacher, whatever. And what we really need is to cultivate the own students' artistry and artistic expression and find out what they're thinking and what they're feeling. What do they know and what do they want?
Oh,
How do you want to play this piece?
Yeah. I'm so glad you went to that. I was planning on getting there eventually, but let's do it right now. One of the hardest things for me personally, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the world of musician injury, is especially with musicians who have injured themselves through overuse or through poor technique or whatever, is regaining that trust in yourself to be your best teacher. Because in at least for me, to kind of open up a little bit, the hardest part about that was I kind of got myself into this mess in some ways, right? Through over practicing in my case and things like that.
Right.
And so regaining that trust, how you as an educator, have you helped students to regain that trust in themselves as their number one teacher, and then you being the facilitator to help that?
Well, that's such a great
nurture.
question. The first thing I tell people is that it's not your fault. It is not your fault that you hurt. This is, and I go systemic. This is a system-wide problem. It's a problem with our educational system that we've inherited this model from 150 years ago, which was designed for a certain thing, to build up the orchestras in Europe. Paris Conservatory spread out to all around Europe and this country and the Far East. And it's not your teacher's fault either, because they were taught this way, and we even, when we have teachers who are abusive or super critical, most of those people had that happen to them. So it's this it's similar to intergenerational trauma that we have. It's been passed down, this what I call toxic self-judgment. We get that from the very beginning. So what do you do if you're 10 years old and you come in and you start taking trumpet lessons and your teacher tells you all the things that you're doing wrong?
Those are the things you focus on.
What does that tell you about yourself?
That there's really just you're focusing on the negative. You're not seeing the positive.
So you think there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't start when you're in college. It starts in the very first lesson, I think. And I can see now that happened to me as well. And it's almost every musician that I've worked with who has been injured has an element of that state. I'm going to call it a state because it's a state of being. When you believe there's something wrong with me, I can never be good enough. I'm never going to get it the way I want, no matter what I do. My teacher is always going to be correcting me. It's a culture of correction and criticism. And I know I'm being a little intense about this, but it's because I see so many. I've worked with over 1,000 injured musicians in the past 25 years, directly, and of course, indirectly through a lot more people, but that's a lot of pain. And I see it directly related to how we think about ourselves and how we've been taught unintentionally to think about ourselves. It's not something that people are doing on purpose. I'm going to make my student be really self-critical. No, it's part of the system. And so then we get there, and then our teachers kind of reinforce that instead of and a lot of musicians will say this: my goal as a teacher is to make myself obsolete. And like parents, that's your goal as a parent, to make yourself obsolete. So you give somebody the tools they need to go forward. But we don't always stop to think about what those tools are, what they really need, the kind of thoughtfulness and and most specifically, body awareness. We can teach them how to do phrasing, and we can teach them history and theory and, all this intellectual stuff that they need to know. But we really need to teach them how to use their body. So when they get to a difficult gig, or they're at a gig and the person next to them sort of sneers at them and looks funny at them because they made a mistake or whatever, how do they deal with that? I worked with somebody in their 80s who was traumatized. They had had other trauma earlier in their life, but they played in an orchestra next to a musician who was constantly criticizing them. And they got to the point where they couldn't play anymore. They were so traumatized by this person, always dumping on them. So this is stuff we really need to help our students have these tools. I spent a lot of time teaching tools of, I'm not going to call it relaxation, but really what it's about is being present. Because if you become fully present in all your senses, you're going to lose those nasty little negative thoughts because there's no room for them.